having me here. I'm a senior researcher working with the Folklore Archive of Moldavia and Bukovina, which is the eastern part of Romania. And this privilege allowed me to encounter significant evidence of foundation rites, both from a retroactive perspective, since the archive was founded 50 years ago, and from present-day fieldwork. Nevertheless, when addressing Western academia, I find myself obliged to explain why Romanians have a higher retention of superstitions and old rituals, and yet not make the cliché of bloodthirsty peasants who follow Dracula's ways even more worse than it is. The word vampire is not even familiar to peasants from Romania. They heard it from the television. We have other traditional demons like Strigoi and Moroi. Anyway, thank you, Bram Stoker, for a successful tourist strategy. The magical protection of buildings may be imagined as a second phase of the process that allows people to occupy a space. First, the energy of the place has to be verified, and then the resident deity is specified with offerings. But the family should not sleep their first night in the new house unless a priest has performed a religious service and a meal has been offered to all the participants, even the passers-by. The ritual deposits in buildings often imply taking a life today and giving it to the construction. Information recorded in the Folklore Archive of Moldavia and Bukovina as part of interviews with subjects from the end of the last century surprisingly indicate a clear memory of the initial human sacrifice. In Suceava, people believe that a new house requires a human head. The following testimony is even more accurate when it comes to the process of substituting the crime with a slayer. Unless you bury a head of a hen in the foundation, the house requests a human head. Someone from the family will die. One might argue that 1980 was a long time ago, but fieldwork data confirm that beliefs persist. Moreover, people living in Romanian towns have inherited traditional knowledge and continue to offer a life of a domestic animal. The most popular choice is the hen or the cock, sometimes indicated as having black feathers, but Romanians also place heads of rams, oxen, rabbits, or ducks in foundations. Ionuț Isac, who is 35 years old and was born in a town called Botoșani, declared this last year in July. You throw the hen alive there in the foundation and pour concrete on it. No later than 3 weeks ago, a man from a village, Chahlo, declared to me that the throat of a hen must be cut on the threshold of a house if you plan to add more rooms to it. Rituals have to be renewed every time space is taken away from the spirit of the place. But before these barbaric practices that may have made you think it is just as bad as vampires, a series of concentric circles is drawn ritually in order to assure the well-being of the family moving into a new house. The virtual map for any locality bears more negative marks than positive if we were to respect all current superstitions. Firstly, houses should not be erected on the ground where deserted buildings stood, and people are not to choose a place that previously hosted a tormented family. This superstition is also mentioned by Claude Lécouteau. The obvious explanation comes from contagious magic. The space was contaminated with ill fortune and destruction, and anybody coming in contact with such a place would suffer. In fact, it is one of the most common superstitions in Romania to avoid even getting near deserted houses like the one in the picture, because they are believed to host demons, evil spirits, witches, but never vampires. You notice 2 wooden spikes on top of the roof. They are still used today to sting evil spirits, as peasants say, since the roof is a vulnerable area of the house and magic protection is especially necessary when several materials are connected, for they form a weak spot. While cemeteries and scenes of crimes are creating danger of haunting activities for the family moving in a house built there, orchards that are cleared, cut down to make space for a household are considered a bad omen because of the possible belief in the spirit of the trees, who will take revenge for their banishing. There are several testimonies in our archive indicating that disaster will strike the family who sits on dug-out roots, and I will only quote the most revealing. It is a great sin. The trees have their lives and you must not kill them in Bacău. Evil spirits come off the stump. Yash. Someone in the house will die. From Suceava. If we come back mentally to the concentric circles I invoked for the gradual process of assuming the space to construct the house, the first phase of checking the resident energies also consists in a dialogue. We have two testimonies on the screen. We used to strike the ground with a club to hear the voice of the earth. If it allowed him, the owner, would build the house. Unless you hear the voice, you shouldn't build it. It is bad. When you choose the place to build a house, you start digging the foundation and you listen to the surroundings. If you hear barking, the house will burn. If you hear mooing, the household will be lucky. People also used to sleep on the ground and interpret dreams, and they built on spots chosen by ruminant animals to lie down. The later belief was also indicated by Claude Lecuteau or Mircea Eliade as an ancient Roman conviction. Deposits with ritual characteristics managed to be preserved up to the end of the last century. As mentioned in 1894 by Speth, and 3 years later by Clay Trumbull. The shadow of a person is measured with a piece of thread or a stick, and then the instrument used is walled up. This represents the second phase of the human sacrifice. The case of the walled up wife of a great mason called Manole from a Balkan folk song is well known. Alan Dundes has also edited a book on the matter in 1996. This is the early 16th century monastery built in Romania, which is connected to the folk song. And the conviction of the people is that the wife of the mason was trapped into the wall in that spot marked with red Slavic letters. Once people could not bury women and children, they symbolized their presence through the shadow, which is a common metaphor of the soul. Romanians have a vivid conviction today that the person whose shadow has been measured ritually, they use the word stolen, will die shortly and the house lives, as a subject from Botoșan declared. The worldwide conviction that you must not pass under a ladder may therefore originate in this magic stealing of the shadow, since several pieces of information from our archive refer to the interdiction of going to construction sites, particularly for this reason. The mason might secretly catch your shadow and you will die within 40 days, a year maximum. Animal deposits are the most frequent offering to genius loci in Romania, as I mentioned in the opening. Various beliefs even indicate animal-shaped guardian spirits of the churches, large buildings, and houses. Witnesses speak about animals like rams, horses, and dogs coming out as ghosts at night time and making terrifying sounds like that are appropriate to them. For example, a church from Nantes is protected by a horse that neighs and trots, and I chose this example because of the largely documented practice of burying horse skulls under the floor in churches from UK, Ireland, Finland, Russia, and USA. I dare to assume that an architectural detail from Romania and Russia that gives the shape of a horse to the beams under the roof originates in a long forgotten practice of burying an actual horse head. You can see here the church You can see the pictures, which are very familiar, paintings which are familiar to Orthodox churches, and also the details of the beams. And here it's a normal house. It's something very frequent in villages to give this shape. Not all the peasants know that these are horses, but this is how magic works. You just have to do it. You don't have to actually understand it. Researchers have this job. A whole foal was found in a hearth from a village in Suceava, according to one of our subjects, who said that at least his head should be used for what we call foundation sacrifice. The same practice was indicated by Sonia Hukantaivol in her work, published 2 years ago, as being active in Western Finland in 1930. Horse skulls can still be encountered in Romania, lying in the sun, on top of pillars from gardens and vineyards, where people believe that they protect against vermin. Therefore, Romanians are aware of their magic power of warding off evil in all of its seen and unseen forms. However, hens are more at hand, and that makes them the typical animal sacrifice performed in 3 ways: placing the hen alive in the foundation, cutting its throat on the threshold, burying just the head and eating the flesh together with the masons, and the modern way, which is a more friendly to animals, letting the poor fowl go. Last year in October, a woman from Iași told me that this practice inevitably leads to the disappearance of the cock or the hen. They let it go by setting it free over the fence, and apparently none of them returned home, since, she said, it was meant to pay for the place. The same field investigation brought up a surprisingly accurate testimony. The 80-year-old informant in the image declared in a playful manner that her mother-in-law said, "Put a hen in foundation." And she did put a hen in foundation, a live one. Had she said, "Put a man I would have put." I think she was just obedient to her mother-in-law. This is the actual house that was built on the living hen, and the fact that Margareta Bonduc referred to the initial human sacrifice was very telling in terms of an active cultural heritage dating so far back. Such ritual deposits are usually situated at the corners of the house, under the threshold or inside the hearth. Objects that replaced sacrifices vary from food offerings to religious symbols, such as crosses or rosaries, and to coins. The latter are the most frequent and harmless choices. A single reference to a boot hidden in foundation was found in a village from Botoșani County, which is in the north part of Romania. Put a boot under a wooden pole to shut the mouth of people. An abandoned boot with laces tied up in an upside-down manner. You bury it to tie the mouths of the enemies and the thieves that might want to rob the house. This type of ritual deposit speaks more about the social integration of the family living under a new roof than of a protection against evil forces. Jane Swan's perspective on concealed leather boots as being more appropriate to deceiving maleficent intentions, for they retain foot shape, she says, applies to Romanian variants too, since the boot has to be worn out and also found accidentally, not just taken from the family. The shoe acts as a magic double of the owner, and tying it up has a sympathetic effect on the others. The same magic analogy is used on St. Andrew's Eve, for example, when peasants fasten the scissors with a specific formula they pronounce 3 times. It is the wolf's jaws I'm tying up, not the scissors. In Romania, charms are often performed with knife blades, clothes, or threads that have to be found. Similar choices with a social purpose suggest branches of cherry trees, which would bring many guests to the house, and since the large number of these insects provokes a sympathetic reaction and many friends would come to visit, or the head of a cuckoo, because everybody loves this bird, and the owners would be treated similarly by the community they are part of. All practices are concurrent with religious service, which is requested before the start of the construction and also when everything is ready and set into place. The general belief is that the owners should not sleep their first night in the new house unless a priest has blessed it with a special prayer and holy water was made on scene. An animal used to be entrapped in the house for the first night, or an old man from the village slept there to save the lives of the family members in case the spirit of the place would require one more sacrifice. This series of precautions is not complete, since the magic protection of the house needs to be reinforced with other architectural motifs that speak about a pre-Christian sun. In the image we have a house from a museum that has here a rosette. You saw it on the first slide. The rosette appears on gates here, on pillars and on crosses. This is a funeral monument. The hexafoil or rosette, as we usually call it, is used to attract protection, and it is placed on houses or on the gate pillar, and sometimes it is even placed there for the head of the forefather, because if you look carefully at the pillar from the gate, you can see it's a human head. And this image is interpreted as a way of paying our respect to our forefathers, our grandfathers from the house. They would protect the household, and the sun as a deity is a double checking of the magic procedure. Although the information registered in the Folklore Archive of Moldavia and Bukovina may seem obsolete, fieldwork reveals an unexpected continuity. More pillars from the gate. Craftsmanship is also transmitted to young generations, as these photos show. This gate has just been finished in Sibiu, which is in Transylvania, in the western part of Romania. However, my 16 years of collecting data from the field have not given me yet the opportunity to document encounters with vampires or Dracula. They must be avoiding houses with hidden charms. Thank you.